Hey, I'm David Elikwu, and this is The Knowledge, a place to consider big and emerging ideas for anyone obsessed with learning more and living better. Each week, I'll share what I'm learning and speak to a variety of guests to hear what they've learned about navigating the world around us. This week, I'm speaking with Urenna Okonkwo, the founder of Cashmere, a luxury fashion Fintech platform that's already helped young women save £3 million. She's helping educate young women about conscious consumption and changing the way that we save. If you love this episode, please do share it with a friend and don't forget to leave a review. What is going on in the life of our favorite founder? How's life?
Life is interesting. There's a lot of things going on, running a business, fundraising for the business, trying to have a personal life, a social life. All my friends have told me they haven't seen my face in years, so I need to sort that out. You included. Yeah, planning a wedding, planning 2 weddings actually, because, as a Nigerian, you can never just have one wedding.
Wow, that is a lot. Okay, tell me more about the business side of things, because for anyone that doesn't know, you're the founder of Cashmere, which is an amazing business, but I'll let you describe it in your own words.
Yeah, sure. So Cashmere is a savings app designed for the next generation of aspirational female consumers, helping them save up for their favorite luxury products and experiences in a much more financially responsible manner. So the current iteration for Cashmere is a savings app that helps young women save up for their favorite luxury fashion and beauty products without them having to get into debt or, dip into their other important savings, reduce their living standards, or, rob a bank. And so we've got partnerships with a bunch of luxury retailers like Selfridges, Harrods, Farfetch, Harvey Nichols, and so on. And, what we're really building in terms of our big vision is to empower women to be good with their money so that they can have access to the lifestyle that they want. So not just about helping them save up for luxury fashion, but also looking at what are these other key life moments and what lifestyle do they want to live in the future, and how can we get them to make those good financial habits so that they can actually achieve their desired lifestyle.
I love it. I actually really love the idea of the business as well, particularly because, as you know, I'm very fond of saving and, hoarding away as much as possible. But how did you get into it? Where did the idea come from? And also, was it strictly just due to your background? Because I know you were a financial advisor before.
Yeah, so it was kind of like really random, and it was due to a bunch of reasons. So, my background, I work as a financial advisor at a private wealth management firm in London, and basically managing investments for high net worth individuals. But then I'm someone who for the past, 15 years or so, I've been a luxury consumer or lover or whatever. So I grew up loving Gossip Girl and wanting everything in the wardrobe and so on. I grew up reading Vogue and all of that stuff. But yeah, so it was kind of like, basically the idea came to me. I was in Harrods with my friends, and I basically saw a pair of Christian Louboutin heels, and I was like, I need them. And I tried it on, and it was perfect and all that. And then I looked at the price tag. I was like, oh crap. And the shoes were about, they weren't too ridiculous. They were about £650. And, a part of me was like, I could pay for it. I could buy it. I had money. I had loads of money in my savings account and all that. And then the other part was, I could also use my credit card. It wasn't like I didn't have any money or options to do it. But, but the other side of me was like, that's not really responsible. I can't just, impulsively drop £600 on a pair of shoes I hadn't budgeted for and stuff. No way in that tax bracket for me to be able to do that. So I ended up not buying the shoes. And then later on, I was just thinking to myself that, if I had a special stash of cash or, like money that was earmarked towards treating myself to all the nice things that I love, then I wouldn't have, felt that guilt. Because like I said, the problem wasn't that I didn't have money or options. It was just that those options were not necessarily the most financially responsible options to take at that given point. So that's kind of how the initial idea just got planted into my head. And then from then on, I just started to do a bit more like research into understanding, what the fintech landscape was looking like. So at that point, I didn't even know the word fintech existed because I came from a
Yeah.
traditional finance background, and it's a completely different world to this tech world. Like they don't mix at all. So I started doing a lot more research into that, and then also looking at who my potential target audience could be, and sort of understanding their attitudes towards luxury and spending, saving, and credit, and all of that stuff. And there was a lot of interesting findings that came out from that in terms of, we're living this very hugely consumerist world where, Instagram is literally telling us to buy every single thing on this planet. And then you then add, this Instagram lifestyle with influencers and all of that stuff. And then you then add how easily it is to get credits in terms of credit cards and buy now, pay later models and all of this stuff. So it's like a lot of young people, because of all these pressures to want to keep up with this lifestyle that most people cannot have, they tend to make bad financial decisions in terms of, there's research to show that young people are spending £400 a month on luxury, and 7 in 10 of them are getting into debt in order to keep up with this lifestyle, keep up with their favorite influencers. And obviously that's not financially sustainable because, it's maybe when you're 19, 20, 21, and you think, okay, it's fine, I can do all that. But then when you're getting close to your 30s and you realize, oh, I need to get a mortgage, and you've messed up your credit because you were spending, all that, accumulating so much credit on ASOS, it's not a really good thing to do. So yes, anyway, based on all of that stuff, I decided rather than if I look at the existing savings apps already out there, they're not really built with like, the next generation of consumers in mind, because at the end of the day, we talk about saving and investing, all of that stuff, but no one ever talks about why are we saving and investing. And at the end of the day, savers are also spenders. You're not saving money just to accumulate it for no reason. You're saving it so you can spend it on something. So it's like a way to get, I believe that a way to get young people particularly into that sort of good habits of saving their money, investing their money, is to help them picture this future lifestyle that they want to have, and then get them to start building those good financial habits so that they can achieve that lifestyle. So I feel like, there's no point telling someone, oh, you need to save up for a pension. Like a young person just be like, why? Because it feels like it's 50 years, in 50 years time, I don't need it now. But if you phrase it in a way that like, what type of lifestyle do you want to have? Like you want to have paid off all your mortgage and all your debt. You want to be able to take 2 holidays a year. You want to be able to do this, this, and that. And then based on that, this is how much you need. And then this is how much you need to start saving now in order to have that X amount of money. I feel like when those conversations are being had, then young people will be more likely to engage with it. But when you just say, save, invest, whatever, like no one's really going to engage with that. So I decided that I want Cashmere to be that product, the product that really understands, you as a consumer, like what are your goals and aspirations, and how can we help you build those financial habits now in order for you to achieve that, whatever the time scale is.
Yeah. Why do you think that young people have such a hard time saving and learning how to save?
I think it's because, I think it's a bunch of things, particularly like, the society that we live in, everything is all just consumption. And, there hasn't really been, we're not taught anything about financial education in schools. Unless your parents are very financially savvy, you're probably not going to be taught about that at home either. So we've just, young people have never really been given those tools, and the young people who do tend to be given those tools are those who have parents who are financially savvy, and then obviously those tend to be the ones who are relatively wealthy. So this is how the rich stay rich. But yeah, and I think it's because of that, and then also then if you add whole sort of society that we live in terms of like there's a lot of pressures for young people to want to keep up and stuff, and there's this whole thing of like young people don't like delayed gratification, they want instant gratification and all that. So there's all of these things that sort of like play into mind that people would just rather not save, that they just want to have it now. I think and I think also it's to do with the fact that when it comes to financial education, it just seems so complicated and too much jargon, and just no really realistically the average person just doesn't care enough. And when you sort of make it so complicated for the average person to understand, of course they're not going to want to engage. So part of the thing that we do at Cashmere is we do like personal finance workshops for women, and we make sure that these workshops are very much jargon free, so that anybody literally with half a brain cell will be able to understand everything that's being said. Because the more you make things full of jargon, the more you exclude the majority of the population, because they don't have the knowledge or whatever, or energy or time to want to start Googling what does SIP mean and what does this mean and what does that mean. Realistically, no one's going to do that. So we try and make sure it's very much jargon free and easily accessible to everybody, regardless of their background.
Yeah, I think that's so good that you specifically take the time to do that education piece, because I think there's a lot of other platforms that claim to want to solve the problem of people not having that amount of financial education, or wanting people to be able to access things and buy things that they want. And I think this ties back into what you were mentioning about the delayed gratification, not wanting to save necessarily. And so you have some products that seem good on the surface, for example, like Klarna. I hope you don't mind me, naming your competitors, but it's interesting that some companies like Klarna, for example, get a bad rep because they've provided something which on the surface, realistically, could be a good thing. You're providing a way for people to get credit, to be able to buy things, you're paying in installments. But then a combination of some of these other factors, like people not having the right financial education, the impulse buying and impulse shopping that a lot of people do because they want that instant gratification. And then also, I guess, the education aspect of not of providing a product and not necessarily telling people the best way to use it and utilize it.
Yeah.
Someone like me might look at it and be like, oh, of course you can use this. You just do this, you just do that, you just do this. But if the product itself doesn't educate you on those things, and you already have some bad habits that you've gotten from being on social media, just growing up around lots of other teenagers, then it can be very difficult to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like even if you want to talk about buy now pay later and Klarna and all that stuff, I mean, credit is not necessarily a bad thing, and credit has always existed. Klarna is basically, for example, if you look at Klarna and Affirm and ClearPay and all these other companies, they're basically like a glorified store card. We've always had store cards. We have Argos cards and Next cards and John Lewis cards and all these things. They've always existed for as long as I can remember. But the problem is that those cards, you knew what those things were meant to pay for. Like your Argos card, for example, would be like if you needed to buy a new washing machine. Let's say your washing machine broke down, you need to buy a new one. You're not going to be buying 50 washing machines. Like you're only going to ever need one,
Yeah.
And so things like that work very well for these buy now pay later models, work very well for those type of things, like a sofa or washing machine, or like things that are going to last a very long time and you only ever really need one. But I remember I read an article that what's it called? I think Affirm, either Affirm or ClearPay, one of them companies, their biggest 60% or 70% of their sales comes from Peloton, because obviously Pelotons are expensive. They're like $2,000. Most people are not going to be able to put $2,000 just to buy a treadmill or a bike. So people pay for it in installments, which makes a lot of sense. And realistically, how many Pelotons do you need? You're only ever going to need one. So yeah, and I think it's perfect for this type of things. But what I don't agree with is, why am I going on ASOS to buy a £20 top, and the default is for me to pay in installments rather than just pay that £20? Like it literally, I've literally seen going on Pretty Little Thing and all these other websites for like £8 dress, and they're telling me, "Oh, pay in installments." Why? £2 a month when I can just pay the same. It makes no sense, because then it sort of like starts to make young people think that like, oh, like I shouldn't think about whether I can afford this or not. I should just get that instant gratification now, because come on, like £8, really?
Yeah, and I think part of that as well is that it makes it seem smaller and more bite-sized. But the issue is when, okay, so you sign up for this thing where you're going to be paying £2 a month for the next 4 months. Then you sign up for another thing where you're going to be paying £100 for 10 months. And then you sign up for another thing. And suddenly you're now, you have to pay £300 a month for the next for the next
Exactly.
5 months when you add it all up.
Exactly, and that's the problem. That's the problem, because, like you said earlier, on paper, it's not a bad thing. It's just the way human beings are. Human beings are inherently greedy. You're always going to want more. So if you create systems in place that encourages greed, then of course people are going to take the piss with it. So yeah, that's my issue with these phones. But recently the government have said they're going to start regulating buy now pay later companies, and Klarna announced a couple of months ago that they're going to start reporting to the credit reference agencies. So if you are planning on, like, let's say getting a mortgage, it's going to come up in your mortgage application that you're constantly using Klarna. That's going to be a bad thing. because that's a red flag for, obviously when you're trying to get a mortgage, the banks don't want to see that you're relying too much on credit because it's not a good thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of like people's usage of it.
Yeah. So where does Cashmere fall on that scale? Because I know your positioning is more as a platform for saving rather than just for spending, even though you're saving to spend.
So what we really position ourselves is more around conscious consumption, because we're not telling people, oh, it's bad to like nice things, because I mean, who doesn't like nice things? I love nice things. But we're saying here's a much more responsible way of achieving those nice things. There's no point. I remember early on when I was doing my research into doing like user interviews, and the people were telling me that like they would spend their entire paycheck on like a Chanel handbag, and they will have no money left over for the rest of the month. They literally have to live off like pasta, and it's like, why? So you're just doing all this for the gram, and then there's nothing in it, like there's no food in your cupboard. It makes no sense, But if you just paste it out for a bit, for a few months, and then save up for it, you can buy that Chanel handbag that you really want and still have food in your cupboard. That's what we're trying to promote, that like sort of balance. Like, it's okay. We believe that you can have it all. Just do it responsibly. It doesn't have to be either or.
I don't know if you saw, I think it was probably a few years ago now, there was that story of that girl. I think she was from Zimbabwe.
Oh, yeah, Visa Bay.
She was an influencer. Yes, Visa Bay. And she'd been buying all these expensive handbags, £2,000-3,000, all of these things. And then suddenly she was asking people for money on the internet because she couldn't afford to get her visa extension or something like that.
Yeah, and it's so funny because the visa thing was like 1,500, £2,000. I'm like, one of those handbags you're holding could pay for like 2 visas. But yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. The Instagram lifestyle is just honestly crazy, and and I just hope that things get better in terms of more people start to understand that Instagram is not real life, and start to make better, responsible decisions with how they achieve this desired lifestyle that they want.
Do you think that Instagram should have to be responsible for the changes in consumer spending and changes in consumer lifestyle as a result of people using their platform?
It's one of those things that would be really, really hard to do. It'd be very, very hard to do that, because then it's like, okay, so if Instagram are gonna sort of moderate that, then that means they have to moderate everything in terms of like people using filters and people making themselves look thinner and all of this stuff. And then it then becomes like, okay, Instagram is like our nanny now. Like, I think it is up to us as human beings to actually make smart decisions. And if for people who do understand, the bad side of things, actually actively like be vocal and speak out about all these things. I think it would just be really, really hard to get Instagram to do it, because then that means they have to police every single thing on the platform. And
I think it's a hard balance to strike though, because my issue with Instagram and by virtue of that, I guess also Facebook, is that it's not some innocent, it's not like Pinterest where you're the one putting stuff up there, or you're just going and viewing just very nonchalantly. Like Instagram and Facebook are actively trying to get you to buy stuff. They're interrupting. You're trying to look at your friend's stuff. They're throwing ads in there, and those ads are coming from cookies. They're following you around the internet, all kinds of sources, figuring out exactly what you like, exactly what you want. And whether you want it at that moment or not, they're just going to feed it to you and keep flashing it in front of your face until you decide to buy it.
Yeah. See, it's hard one for me, because I understand that, but then from a business point of view, I see why they're doing that, because I would do it. I would also do it myself. We've just started doing like Facebook ads and stuff with Cashmere, and like, I would want people to constantly see my ads. So, but I do think there is a balance that needs to be struck, and I think Pinterest does it pretty well. I just love Pinterest so much, because I go on there, and as much as Pinterest is all about sort of like curating like the lifestyle. Pinterest is basically what I want Cashmere to be, but with the financial elements of it. And it's Pinterest is really about curating the life you want, really, in pictures. But it does it in a way that it doesn't feel like intrusive. And they still do ads. Like, I see Pinterest ads and stuff, and it doesn't feel like I'm being forced to purchase something. So I don't know, maybe I need to take a few tips from Pinterest book, but I do agree that there definitely needs to be a balance struck with this whole thing. I mean, I don't know how. I'm not an expert in that space. So yeah, I mean, if Facebook or Instagram want to pay me to figure it out for them, I'll happily do it.
So, how have you found the process of getting Cashmere off the ground? And what have been, I guess there's two questions I want to ask. What were the biggest challenges? And then also, what were the biggest, maybe unforeseen challenges? Because I think there's a lot of things that going into setting up a business, going into the startup world, you might know, or you might envisage, or you might have heard these are the challenges you're going to face. Did
Yeah.
you find that those were identical to your experience? And were there other things that ended up being trickier than you thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the huge things I guess I'll call it challenge was more around, it was a huge learning curve for me because, like I said, I came from a traditional finance background with zero knowledge, zero contacts in this space. So everything I did, everything I learned, I was from scratch. And which in a way is sometimes it can be good because it means that you can learn a lot quicker. You can adapt because you're having to consume a lot of different types of information and within a relatively short period of time. So, so that was definitely a huge challenge at the start. I mean, what I did was, like I said, researching everything. I started to like network more, meet people on Twitter, go to events. There's so many times literally after work. My previous job, I would I would leave my office at like 6:30 to go and attend a networking event somewhere in the city and all that. And then from then on, you start to meet different people within the space. And I also think it's also important to actively talk about what you're doing because you just never know who you're talking to and you never know who they know. If I look at, for example, I think probably majority, if not all of my angel investors on my cap table, I all know them through either I went to an event and I met them there, or I went to an event and I met someone who knew them. That's
Mm.
literally how it's been. So like it hasn't been anyone who I just organically sort of had known for years. Because you know how people say, "Oh, like, I've known so and so for 10 years and invested in my company." No, that doesn't apply to most people. But yeah, so it's definitely important to put yourself out there and stuff. And it can be exhausting. Honestly, it's not easy at all because 9.9 out of 10 times after work you just want to go lie down and watch Netflix. But if it's something that's really important to you, you just kind of have to do it. Another thing is I definitely sort of like once I sort of got into the space, I networked with a lot of different founders and investors and all of that stuff, and just to get like first hand accounts from them on what it really is like to you know be in tech and build a startup and so on. So that when I was actually doing it myself, it wasn't like a lot of things were not, it wasn't a shock to me because one thing I always say like is very different particularly from someone coming from a traditional background is that when you come from a traditional background you're told you go to school, you get your straight A's, you go to university, you get your degree, go work in a what's it called, like company, like a proper company, tech startup company and all that. And there's like, and it's like all about you working really hard, and if you work hard you get what you want, all of that stuff. When you're building your company, it's not like that. Like forget about all of those things that's been told, because it's real. You can work as hard as you like, as you want. Doesn't necessarily mean that it will translate into you being successful in your business. And that's just the hard reality that I had to like make sure that I fully understood, because building a company is, there's that famous stat that 90% of companies fail in their first year. But,
Yeah.
like it is really, really hard. And, not everyone's, because there are certain things that are out of your control. Like, who would have predicted the pandemic would have happened and wiped out a lot of businesses? There are some things that the market is just not gonna, it's the way the world is moving means that there isn't a place for your company anymore. There's all these things, so it doesn't matter how hard you work, it's just not going to happen. And if you now look at, if you want to take it to like societal injustices in terms of like racial bias and things like that, you could be the most hardworking black woman in the world, but no one's going to want to fund you because they have all of these biases against you that they don't think, like, because when an investor thinks of who a successful founder is, it's not, they don't think of a black woman, they think of a white man. So already those doors are already shut in your face. Doesn't matter what your numbers are, doesn't matter how hard you work and stuff. So there's all these things that are out of your control that could mean
Yeah.
that your company doesn't work. So I think very early on it's always important for founders to understand that like sometimes it's out of your control. I mean, sure, work as hard as you can to make sure your business is a success, but it could also not work out. And I think the sooner we all
Yeah.
sort of understand that, the easier you'll be able to sleep at night.
So you mentioned you have investors and there's fundraising. Have you largely just bootstrapped? And what's that part of the journey been like?
Yeah, so starting with Cashmere, yes, I bootstrapped basically funding the company through like the money I had saved up myself because I know I had quite a bit of money that saved up to like basically buy a house, and then I decided to invest in my company. So I'm gonna need that money to pay off very soon because I'm planning on buying a house soon. Anyway, so what's it called? So I bootstrap business, and I think it's quite good to bootstrap because a lot of times like because of like TechCrunch and all these like tech publications, you're always seeing so and so raise 5 million, 10 million, 20 million pounds off of like an idea, blah, blah. So you feel like automatically that is what you should do. And sometimes, depending on what kind of business you're building, sometimes you need to raise in order to build the company. But for most businesses, I don't think you actually need to raise because there's been so many like improvements in technology. Like there's loads of like no code tools. There's so many things out there that can actually allow you to build an MVP product, like a basic version one of your products, like at least test the idea out and start to build traction. And then from then, once you can be able to prove that like there are people who actually want what you're doing, then you can then go out and raise. And you'd actually then raise because with better terms from investors because you actually have something, you have some data to prove that what you're building works compared to when if, for example, you're a first time founder, you've never built a business before, and then you're trying to raise on an idea, investors are just going to look at you like, what? As much as a lot of investors say, oh, yeah, we invest at idea stage, nah, they don't. Like, and that's the annoying thing. It's like people need to be more honest and transparent about what they look for when they want to invest in companies. Because as much as, yeah, they might say, oh, yeah, we invest idea pre seed, but if you look at the founders they've invested in idea pre-seed that usually visited founders who already have a huge but whereas if you're like a first time founder, you have no track record, nothing whatsoever, then there's not going to invest in you. That's just the reality of it. It's always important to like try and do as much as you can on your own and then go out and raise because then it also shows that you actually know what you're doing because when you've had the opportunity to wear multiple hats, you become a lot more knowledgeable in your space compared to like if you let's say you raise very early on and then you just quickly hire people to take over like product and design and engineering and all that stuff and then you don't you as CEO just kind of like get the high level summary of everything and not really sort of like be deep in what they're building. So sometimes, so it does have its pros and cons, but I genuinely believe that like the best way to do it is to bootstrap at the start. Again, depending on your business. If you're doing like something deep tech or whatever, then you might need to raise for that. But for most businesses, I think it's important to just bootstrap for a bit, prove your hypothesis, and then have your data and then go out and raise. And then it just puts you in a much better position compared to someone who's just trying to raise with just an idea.
Yeah. And you've done really well considering one, largely bootstrapping and using your own funds and also working with a really small team. I think I saw, was it from 2020 that you had processed about 1.5 million in savings from users?
Yeah, so we've actually now done 3 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
quick update. Yeah, so we've done about 3 million in savings and we've done about just over £1 million in spending, the money that's been spent on the app, which is pretty cool.
Sure.
And we've always worked as a small team. So right now our team is literally made up of 2 people, me and my lead, like interns and stuff in like here and there to help. But the core team has always just been like 2 people. And to be honest, I always say I want to build like an Instagram because I know when Instagram got acquired by Facebook, they had like 8 people on the team and it got acquired
Yeah.
for like over 1 billion or something. So I'm like, that's what I'm trying to do. It's possible because I don't sometimes I don't think like you need that many people as long as everyone's working hard and then you can actually achieve a lot with less people. There's a lot of
Yeah.
automations out there. Like I live for automations, so if there's a way you can achieve something great with less people rather than more, why wouldn't you do that? Because sometimes when you have too many people start to then be a bit lax because there's a lot more
Mm.
cushion. Because if you think about like when you're in corporate world, like there's bare people in it, so like you can afford to not do as much work compared to like if
Yeah.
you're in a startup
You
of
have less skin
three.
in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas when you have a startup of 3 or 4 people, everybody's contribution is important. If one person is slacking, it would affect everybody else. So everyone needs to sort of like pull their weight and stuff. So yeah, and I kind of prefer that sort of environment compared to like just a cushiony environment, which was what I was doing before.
Yeah. Is that the kind of exit you're looking for on the topic of Instagram?
So I mean, I don't know what my ideal exit would be because obviously, like the two ways is either to get acquired or to IPO. I don't know
Mm,
which one I would prefer. Right now, I'm just trying to build a great business, and then whatever opportunities come out of that, would be great. I mean, I always say that like, oh, it'd be great to like get acquired by like LVMH or something. That'd be amazing.
yeah,
But then I also would be like, oh my god, but imagine if Cashmere IPO'd. So I don't know. We'll see. Let me just focus on the now. Let me focus on
yeah,
building. But yeah, it'll be. But I definitely would. I think I getting to the point of IPO would be great though because particularly for the Black community because we don't really have that in the UK.
yeah,
Everyone's like, right now the startup founders that I know, everyone's all building and stuff, and I just hope like in the next 5 to 10 years or so, we see some amazing exits from the Black community, and because there's loads of people building incredible businesses. So, and then what then that means is that if we get incredible exits, we then sort of like build the next generation of Black angel investors who are actually people
yeah,
who have built businesses and actually have experience in that, because that's one thing that
yeah,
we're lacking significantly in within the Black community. So yeah, that's why I'm hoping for anyway.
yeah. What you said brings to mind two thoughts. First of all, I think part of the issue right now is that in order to have Black exits, you need entries. You need people to
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
fund some of the people that are building companies at the moment. And I think that's probably part of what we're missing.
yeah,
And I'd love to know what thoughts you have on that, particularly from the perspective of I know that you have raised money from people from a variety of backgrounds, and also
yeah.
you're very plugged into the VC scene as well. And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean it's 100% correct that like we can't expect all these exits if no one is funding at the entry level, you know, and that we are really lacking that because if we look at sort of like there's all these diversity reports that keep coming out every second. Like, it's the next time I see diversity reports, I'm just gonna like block anyone that shares it because it's like we know all this information. We don't need another report, but. There's the same information that keeps coming out that like Black founders are well educated, they're resourceful, they're creating jobs, they're doing all these incredible things with very limited money, or either through bootstrapping or they've raised a tiny amount of money and so on. But it's like, but for some reason they're just not getting funded. Like black women are barely getting funded. Like there was that report that came out that basically in the past 10 years, only 7 Black women had raised VC funding. 7 in the
Yeah.
past 10 years. Like that is just disgusting to hear. And it's and the issue is that, when we look at sort of like our white counterparts, a lot of them are plugged into these networks. They can do these friends and family rounds where they're like, oh, I raised 200 grand from my friends and family. I've definitely seen someone raise 1 million from friends and family. I don't know how, but they did. And like if I look at within our community, how many people can really do that? Like how many people can even raise 10K from friends and family, let alone a
Yeah,
hundred grand, two
exactly.
hundred grand? So it's like if we're not all starting from a level playing ground. So of course, like it's going to be harder for black black founders to even get to that Series A, Series B level when nobody wants to
Mm,
fund them at the pre-seed and seed. And the frustrating things are like I feel like a lot of like investors or people within the community, within the startup world, feel like, oh, let's do office hours for Black founders, let's do mentoring for Black founders. And to be honest, like I just find it so insulting because it just automatically assumes that you believe Black founders don't know what they're doing. Because the only reason why you offer mentoring
mm,
and office hours is if you feel, oh, I need to teach them because they don't know what they're doing. Why can't you just give them money? Like we're tired of these office hours. We're tired of all these mentoring. Give us, open your purse, give us the money.
yeah.
And and as much as the people setting up funds to invest in Black diversity, blah 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 blah, but if you're not investing at pre-seed, I don't want to hear it. Genuinely, if you're not
Mm,
investing at pre-seed and seed level for Black founders, and not that underrepresented, underestimated, all these words that don't really mean anything tangible, because what does underrepresented really mean? Like, if
mm,
we're being honest, because we know that, for example, if we look at, let's say, white founders, an underrepresented white founder would be someone, a white male or white female founder who didn't go to university, who lives in Yorkshire. That's an underrepresented. So if you set up a fund that says I invest in underrepresented founders, that's who you're going. That's technically you can invest in that person, But then
Yeah.
there's still no diversity in terms of like racial diversity, because you're just constantly investing in like, oh yeah, this person lives in Leeds. Leeds doesn't have a huge startup space. I'm going to invest in them. That's me taking my underrepresented founder box. But that's why I hate those words, because they're not specific. We need things to be very, very specific. If you say black, you mean black, like black people, people from African and Caribbean ethnicity group or whatever it is. So that's genuinely it. So anything that deviates from that is all nonsense. It's all just hot air. I don't care enough. Like anyone says office hours, blah blah blah, female founders office hours, female founders mentoring, black founders, blah blah. I just don't care enough. So unless
Yeah.
people are willing to open their purse and invest at the pre-seed, seed level for black founders specifically, then not much is going to change. And it's just so frustrating that last year we had the whole Black Lives Matter movement and stuff, and you know, all these, I mean, to be honest, within the VC world, not many funds said anything. Maybe like two or three said something. And even those ones were like, oh, we're going to give ourselves a day off to think about, to reflect. And I'm like, I don't understand. Wow, why are people giving themselves a day off for black trauma?
Yeah.
I'm so confused. They're not going to open their purse, but they'll give themselves a day off work. Make it make sense. So yeah, this whole thing frustrates me so much, as you know. I'm just like, oh my
Yeah,
God.
I was just going to say the part you were saying in terms of being specific, because I remember, I think we both saw there was the Sifted article recently, and the headline is something like a third
Yeah,
of UK unicorns are founded by ethnic minorities. Okay, cool. So you're saying like 30 something percent. When you break that down and ask how many of them are black specifically, it's zero. And it's not just zero. None of them are founded by women either. So
yeah,
zero women, zero black people. But you're using this title of ethnic minority founders, there's 30%. And
yeah,
then I think even beyond that, it's something like 0.2% of black founders that have received VC funding in the last 10 years. In
yeah,
terms of from the total pie, the amount of that's gone to black founders is like a fraction of 1%. So it's
yeah,
not even 1 in 100. It's it's like 2 in 1,000 or 2.5 in 1,000, which is crazy.
yeah,
And obviously, I don't want to paint like a dire picture or anything, but I definitely think you're right in terms of the issue being that a lot of people that have great ideas can't even get past the friends and family round.
yeah,
Because if you can't even get that initial, let's say 15K, just to build your MVP, just to get your idea off the ground, just to actually even afford to take the time to focus on what you're building,
yeah,
it probably doesn't go anywhere. And so I also think about how many great businesses have started and stopped within that period just because they couldn't get any funding, they couldn't get any support, they couldn't
yeah.
get things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen it so many times. I've seen so many like people with fantastic ideas, try and build something, but because there's that lack of support, and I mean like financial support, it just doesn't go anywhere. And another thing that really frustrates me is this whole idea of like, oh, if somebody isn't full time working on their business, it means they're not committed to it. And people like it, and when I hear that, I'm just like, are you stupid? Because the things that a lot of people don't realize that most people are not privileged. Like, you know,
Mm,
if you don't have the privilege of like being able to leave your job, or like and already have like a cushion of money that you can live off while you build your follow your dreams and build your business, if you've got a family to take care of, a lot of black people have family back home they have to send money to, they have parents here that they
yeah.
need to they're paying for. People don't understand like the black tax is a real thing. So when you hear all these investors and non-black investors and people like just talking nonsense, saying like, oh, you need to leave your job, like I can only believe you're committed to your business when you leave your job. I'm like, all right, cool, I will commit to this business if you give me the money. I don't understand. It's
Yeah.
not a no-brainer. Like I've already showed you what I can do, so give me the money and then I'll leave my job. I have no problem leaving the job. So yeah, and I've seen that so many times, just like comments that people have made in terms of like for other businesses, like be like, oh, like it's a red flag that they haven't left their full-time job yet and stuff, as because of that they're not going to fund them. I'm like, yeah. And to be honest, yeah, like as much as I'm criticizing like non-black investors, I've also heard black investors say this too. So yeah.
What's your experience been like from the other side of the table now? Because I know you're a scout, you're a venture scout for backed VC. Is that something you can talk about or not so much?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think so. One of the reasons why I joined Backed was to understand things from an investor point of view and sort of like see what do investors look at when they like what drives the decision to make an investment. And I mean, I do think there's still a long way to go in terms of giving people a fair shot at things. And because I mean, I understand it from an investor's point of view, because when the investor looks at an investment, they want to be convinced that this is like going to return their funds. So let's say it's a fund that's worth £50 million. They want to be sure that if they invest in this company, if they invest, let's say, like 500,000 in this company, that company is going to return that 50 million back. Yeah, it's obviously very hard to tell at the early stages because there's just so many variables out there. But I think, like, goes back to my point about bias, is that I feel like a lot of times people don't give Black founders in particular that's the benefit of the doubt, because I feel like a lot of times where Black founders expected to prove so much already before investors are comfortable making those decisions. Like a number of times I've heard, through my fundraising journey, I've heard investors tell me, oh, like, we really love what you're building. Like, we love your team. We love the product you built so far. Your traction is amazing. Your vision is great, but we're not quite sure. We're not quite ready to invest just yet, to keep us in the loop. I'm like, but what more do you want? You've already told me I tick every single box that, investors look out for at seed stage. No. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, but then you then see other companies like that they invest in, that are like white male or white women, and it's like that company doesn't even have close to enough traction that you have. They probably theirs is just it's like pre-launch, is still an idea sort of thing, and it's like, so for a Black founder, like, immediately you're gonna be like, but what's the difference? And the only difference you can see is that it's to do with race and bias. And the things that a lot of times people like to use that whole word of like, oh, unconscious bias. I don't believe in unconscious bias. I think it's all conscious, but so it's all conscious. I'm sorry, like, but I don't know. I feel like we want to give all these people the grace to, like, oh, it's unconscious. They didn't know what they were doing. But anyway, so back to my point. I think, like, I think so. For example, with back, the way they tend to invest is more around like sort of late seed Series A companies, which are it's a sector agnostic fund. But the thing is, again, back to a point about, if no one's investing at Black founders at the very, very early stage, that first 50K, 100K check, then how are they going to get to that Series A level? So there are a couple of things that we've sort of like put forward to them to implement, which they've started doing. And there's still a long way to go in terms of like investing in Black founders at the like pre-seed early stage, but they are making some moves to do more around that. So fingers crossed other funds would.
Okay. I guess one of the last questions I wanted to ask is, what about, I guess, for existing founders that are out there? Two things. One, maybe what is it about your particular skill set that makes you able to have achieved what you have with Cashmere so far? Again, considering you have a super small team, you haven't had a huge influx of funding, you've largely bootstrapped and built for yourself. You're now at a point where you've had 3 million in saved through your app, through your platform. But like, what would you attribute that kind of success to, and what things do you think that other young founders could emulate to be able to achieve something similar?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of things, like, I mean, there's all the generic words like, you need to have like grit and tenacity and discipline and all these things. But, and to be honest, do apply, but it's more of like, how I see it is having a strong enough why. So it's like, why are you building this company? Like, what do you want to see in the world in the next 5 to 10 years? And how is your company going to help shape that? And if you can sort of like, have a strong enough answer to that question, then that is what should be able to keep you going despite all the negative things that might come through starting a business. Because running a business is not easy at all. Like 99% of the time, I'm stressed. Like I just want to crawl in the hole and just stay there forever. But I know what my why is. I know I know how I want to see the world. I know what I want to build. I know what I want to see. That sort of like keeps me going. Another thing is also like celebrating the small wins. And it's something I need to start doing a lot more, because I've been told so many times I don't do it enough. And what I mean by that is like, it doesn't matter how tiny it is. If something's a win, just celebrate it. If you're a solo founder, like just you as like, you don't have a team, celebrate with yourself. If you have a team, celebrate. It doesn't matter what it is. So for example, like it could be you just shipped like fix the bug or something on your website or your app or whatever. It's like celebrate that, because those little wins like keep you going. Because sometimes it might feel like you're not making any progress, because there's still, it's easier to see what you haven't done compared to what you've done. And I'm very
Yeah.
guilty of that. I'm always looking at, oh, we haven't done this, we haven't done that, we haven't achieved this, and I forget about all the other things I've achieved. So try as much as possible to document those wins. Like even if it means every week, you and your team or you on your own write down every single win that you've done that week. You can categorize into like small, medium, big, and then actually celebrate that and be proud of yourself for that. Because then you can actually see, I've actually made a lot of progress, and it would help significantly with your mental health, honestly. So yeah, I think those things are things that are, I feel, tangible things that you can do to sort of like help you keep going despite all of the madness that comes with building a company.
Yeah. Can I ask how you found managing your mental health as well? Because between the late nights and then also everything else that you have on your plate, I know you're getting married soon, you're planning 2 weddings, well, one in Nigeria, one here, you're doing all these things. How do you manage to keep it all together?
God, yeah, I don't even know. I do. I mean, I do try and I definitely try and take. I don't do like too many late nights anymore compared to before. Like before, I would literally be working to like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. and stuff. But now, by unless there's unless we're in in a period where there's a lot of things that need to be done, I usually stop working at like 7 p.m. or so, and then I actually take the rest of the evening off, and I just shut down like my computer, watch Netflix and stuff. I don't look at work related stuff. Weekends, I also try and do that too, because it does help. Because before, I was just literally on 24/7. Like it got to a point where I wasn't sleeping. Like I was literally having like maybe 2 hours of sleep a day because I was constantly switched on. And as a founder, it's just so hard to switch off sometimes, because you're constantly thinking about ideas. You're constantly thinking about what you haven't done. You're never ending to do list. Whereas when you're an employee for a company, like, the minute 5 p.m. hits, well, if you're a normal employee, not if you're a lawyer, because 5 p.m. law, that's when you. But for most people, maybe pick up a bag and go home. Like, well, pre-pandemic, you go home. But yeah, but as a founder, you just can't do that. Like, you're just constantly thinking about stuff. So trying to take as much separating like your work from the rest of your life is so important. Another thing is also trying to take holidays, because another thing I struggle to do is actually take holidays, because I'm just like, I don't have many people to delegate this work to. It needs to be done, so it then means I'm just constantly working. But I try, even if I might not take a whole week off or whatever, but like I would take like 2 days in that week off, and I'll maybe do like Thursday and Fridays off, so I only work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then at least I have like a 4-day weekend. Just little things like that just help, because I know realistically I can't take a week off at this point, because we have a very tiny team. I don't have the capacity to start delegating. Obviously, hopefully soon, once we close our round, I'm going to be making a few more hires, but right now it's just not possible. So I just try and take those little breaks here and there as I can. Bank holidays, definitely, I love them. I always, even on my calendar, I schedule those holidays, so I know like today I'm not working.